Good evening, everyone. I will give folks another moment or two to join us, and then we will jump right in. All right. Well, good evening and welcome again to tonight's Tiger Talk webinar. My name is Casey Ford, and I serve as a director in the Gantt Center for Student Experience here at Clemson University. A large part of my role is supporting your experience as a parent or family member of our incoming Clemson Tigers. And there are a number of ways that we do that, particularly for you all going through the student and family orientation process. So perhaps you have been able to join us for a Ready, Set, Roar session here on campus or clicked around in that virtual orientation platform. Whether you have or not, though, we also have this series, what we call our Tiger Talk Parent Family Webinar Series, just as another way to get that connection. So we know that you can't always get all your questions answered from all the people that you want those answers from, one day on campus or through an email or a phone call. And so it's been our hope that this offers you some more in-depth time with specific campus partners to address specific topics and make you feel like you are ready to go and ready to support your student as we transition to the fall. So we are nearing the end of our series. We've got this session tonight and then another one next week, which I'll talk about in a bit. But this one is unique in that it features our current students and current family members. So they will share more about who they are in a little bit. But they serve as campus leaders in many aspects. And so they are here to offer some perspective of their Clemson journeys. So I will share some recommendations, some resources, some kind of key tools and programs for families, and then we will transition into a panel discussion with the rest of this crew. A couple of quick notes as we get started. As I said, this is kind of the overview of the night. You'll hear some more in-depth introductions from our staff members and our ambassadors. We'll talk through some questions and answers that you may have, offer some of our family programs presentation content, and then wrap up with some final remarks. A few notes about the Zoom environment. I'm sure many of you are far more comfortable with Zoom than you ever wish to be, but just a quick note about the webinar piece here. So you'll see a toolbar at the bottom or the top of your screen, you'll see many buttons there. One of those is the question and answer tool. I know for mine, I have to click on that more button with the three dots and then click on that question and answer button there. We would ask that you use that to submit any questions that you may have. We are going to use the chat on our end to share out any links, any resources that go along with what we're sharing. But if you could submit your questions to that Q&A button, that will allow us to best address those. We don't have a great way to use the raise hand feature in the webinar environment. So if you can do us a favor and avoid that, but just use that Q&A button, we will be able to best help you out using that tool. You'll also notice that audio and video has been muted. So hopefully we are the only faces that you see. Again, that's just kind of to make sure that you got the best view of the content that we have to share. You'll also notice that on your screen it says that we are recording. So we record each of these sessions. We share those out through the Clemson Parent and Family Experience portal, typically a couple days after our session, and then we will share or publish those rather on the Clemson Family Programs YouTube page. So we'll make sure to add that link in the chat before we close out the session, but want you to know that you will be able to reference this later should you so desire. Okay, jumping right in, I mentioned in my introduction that you are, hearing a lot about how to best support your students transition to Clemson, and we think that is super important. But also really want to acknowledge that you, as a parent and family member, are having your own experience of that transition. And so there are a few things that we have in place that are specifically for you. I want to make sure that we cover those tonight. The first one, I'm hoping that you all have seen this before. I mentioned it in my kind of opening remarks, but the Clemson Parent and Family Experience portal. We'll send a link that goes to that system in the chat as well. But this is essentially our hub for all things family communication. You can see that it kind of functions like a news feed. We've got some groups in there that I would compare sort of to a Facebook group. So they're called communities within the portal. You are very likely already in the 2026 Parent and Family Orientation community. So that means that you have been seeing posts and receiving emails that have to do with your student's experience from May until, or yeah, May up through August. And so would certainly recommend that you get connected to the portal if you have not yet done so. The next place to look would be our website. So again, we'll share out this link to make sure you've got it. In full transparency, our department is in a bit of a merger and adjustment currently. So some places you will see Center for Student Leadership and Engagement. Other places you will see Gantt Center for Student Experience. They are the same center, same program, same people, just going through a bit of a name change, which is why you may see that pop up in some web and social media spots. So if you navigate to that website, I honestly just Google Clemson Family Programs to get there the quickest. If you go there and hover over that Family Programs drop down, you will see a Family Orientations tab. Again, talked about this in the beginning, but lots of ways to engage in that process. This session that we're on now is, again, our second to last of those Tiger Talks that I mentioned. So we've made it pretty much to the end of our schedule here. Hosted a session last night with our Vice President for Student Affairs, Dr. Doug Hallenbach, and his leadership team with you tonight with our ambassadors here. And then we'll have one more on August 5th. So the other key thing, again, a reminder about these is that they have all been recorded and posted with exception of last night. So if you see topics on this list and are thinking, oh, I missed that, or I didn't get a chance to check those out, would certainly recommend that you do that. Okay, you may also be aware that Clemson hosts a family weekend each fall. So we have our family weekend football game. That's a game day designation. That's going to be the Clemson, North Carolina game on Saturday. And so our office puts on some programming kind of anchored around that game. We've got a tailgate on that Saturday, some academic college events that Friday afternoon, along with check-in and some other socials, a farewell brunch on that Sunday, service project, and many other game day festivities happening throughout the weekend. So we open registration for that event on July 15th, and we will keep registration open until September 4th. So definitely free to ask any questions about what that weekend looks like. All right, one of my favorite resources, the best crew that I like to share about when we talk about family programs is our Clemson Family Ambassador Board. And so a handful of them are here to share a little bit more about who they are, but as a group, they represent all current Clemson parents or supporters of students. So they're about 60 strong, and they are consultants in the Clemson family experience. Again, I think we've figured out some good things to share as staff members, some success strategies that work, but I am not a Clemson parent, and I understand that some things probably hit a little bit differently when they come from folks who have been in your shoes. And so we are going to spend some time doing just that. In just a moment, I'm going to turn it over to both our Clemson family ambassadors as well as our orientation ambassadors who can speak to the student experience, tell them, or tell you rather, a little bit more about who they are, and then answer questions that you may have. All right, with that, I will turn it over to our orientation ambassadors to introduce themselves. I think you're muted, Lanier.
A senior criminal.
I think we heard you for a second and then it got muted again.
Okay, I can go through it again if you can hear me now.
Yes, that is perfect.
Okay. Well, I'm Leader Ashley. I am a senior criminal justice major from Jefferson, Georgia, which is right outside Athens. And my word of advice to family and guests is to always lay out what those communication expectations are with your student before they come to campus.
Perfect.
Hi everyone, my name is Bryce Woolery. I'm a sophomore psychology major on the pre-medical track from Grayson, Georgia, and my word of advice is to reassure your students and give them the space to grow.
Hi, Tigers. My name is Grady Chapman. I'm a sophomore automotive engineer from Florence, South Carolina. And my word of advice to y'all is to make sure your students are independent.
Hi everyone, my name is Jordan Pope and I am a junior psychology major and I'm from West Union, South Carolina. And my word of advice to you as a family member is to not compare your student's journey to anyone else's. Encourage them to be their own person and forge their own path.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. Just a quick plug for this group. They are headed into their last of many, many Ready, Set, Roar in-person orientation sessions. I believe 18 was our number this summer. And so they are, to say they're well practiced is certainly an understatement. They have spent their summer getting back to campus, helping make sure that our newest students and families have the tools for success. So they are, again, more than experts when it comes to the Clemson student experience, and super grateful for their presence here tonight. All right, transitioning to our Clemson Family Ambassadors. Lou, take us away. Tell us who you are and offer one piece of advice to our incoming families.
Sure. My name is Lou Preet. I'm a parent just like most of you. I've got a graduate from Clemson. I've got a junior at Clemson, and I, just like you, have a freshman coming in this year. So I've been through this a lot. My advice is to remember that we've been mom and dad for 18 years, but now it's time to watch the kids shine. Let them kind of step back in the wings, let them shine, let them show you what they can do. Um, there's so many chances for them to grow and just experience adulthood on their own now. Let them do that. They'll prove to you how wonderful they are. We all know they're wonderful because they're our kids, right? But they're going to prove it to you time and again if you let them. Just trust Clemson is a safe place to let them take those first adult steps.
Awesome. Trina?
Hi, everyone. My name is Trina Huggins. I'm from Columbia, South Carolina, and I have one child there. She's going to be a junior. My advice is to encourage your students to get involved, to make those connections so um, they don't feel lonely. So just make sure they get involved in some activities.
Awesome. And finally, Shay.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm Shay Razakis. I have the very great pleasure of being the chair of the Clemson Family Ambassador Board this year. Both my husband and I attended graduate school at Clemson. I have a son who graduated in 25, and then my daughter is a rising senior this year. My one word of advice would be to encourage your student to utilize the resources at the Academic Success Center as soon as they get on campus. That is just such a wonderful thing to enable them to hit the ground running. A variety of resources from one-on-one tutoring to group tutoring to academic coaches and student success seminars. So encourage them in that direction, and they will really be off to a good start.
Awesome. Thanks, Shay. All right, that concludes kind of the formal presentation and introduction portion of the night. As I shared, we are really hoping to use the next little bit of time, the remainder of our time together, to answer some live questions that you may have. So if there are things that are on your mind as we approach August, if there are topics that you would love to hear a current parent or student perspective on, again, if you'll submit those through the question and answer feature, we will get those posed to our panelists. The first one I'm seeing, and I'm happy to speak to the family weekend nuance of this, but in general, I think it probably makes sense to talk about football tickets. So either CFAB or OAs, can you speak to the process for buying football tickets? And while we're here, just the process for attending athletic events in general as a student.
Okay, I'm gonna try to jump in, but if my Wi-Fi cuts out, I know another OA is gonna be able to answer this really well. But I'm gonna talk about the student side of getting student tickets. So maybe a CFAB member can talk about that family side of things. But the biggest one for like maybe family weekend is checking out the family like website that Sherelle and Miss Casey has put in the chat. That's the best way to get that like package for everything. But if your student's interested in getting right around 10, so in the next 2 getting email from Clemson Athletics to basically rank all the different home games that they might want to attend, participate in, but it is for your student for student tickets. And so they're going to rank all those home games and get one themselves. To increase your students' chances of getting the games that they want, we always encourage them to join IPTE Collegiate Club because that means their name is entered into that lottery a few more times. So that could increase their chances of getting certain tickets. In terms of maybe going into their sophomore, junior, senior year, they might be eligible to receive a season ticket package, but as incoming freshmen, they're only interested in that lottery because that's the only one they're eligible for. For other sporting events, though, we always say that those are free for any student to go to because they are, so you just have to stand in line. But the more popular a game would be, the longer you might have to stay in line. So if you're interested in Clemson men's basketball playing Duke, that's a very high energy, high attendance game. So your student might have to wait longer, but that is free for them to attend.
Awesome. Lou, anything to add there?
So, a couple things. There's multiple things to look at about getting tickets for Fall Family Weekend. So there's the football games, but then CFAB has their own family tailgate as well. So if you go to the parent and family experience portal, you can look to sign up for the tailgate there. But as far as game day tickets, I think Linear did a good job of covering the student side. Parent side, you can try and contact IPTE directly. You can try and look on resale places like StubHub or Ticketmaster. I would highly recommend you avoid buying tickets off of somebody on Facebook or some other social media because more than likely you'll get scammed. Sad fact of the day. So just make sure you're going to a reputable site to purchase your tickets if you're not getting them directly through IPTE. But also, if you want to participate in the other fall family weekend activities, make sure you check out the portal.
Would echo what Lanier and Lou shared. We did, as a part of our family weekend registration, include a specific link. So a specific family weekend football ticket link that goes to just a different section of that Clemson Ticketmaster page. We'll share that link here in the chat shortly. Again, not a requirement that you use that. Athletics does offer us a specific section or a series of sections, I should say, of tickets for families at that game. So you're certainly welcome to use that to purchase those. Otherwise, general Clemson Ticketmaster, or as Lou said, any other reputable site would be our recommendation for sure. All right, scrolling along here, a question for Lou and Shay specifically. How did you all set real expectations around grades and communication frequency of academic progress with your students? Lou, Trina, and Shay, I should say.
Well, I'll start out by saying that the university does a good job of treating your students like an adult. So you'll have to talk with them about sharing their grades because you won't get them. It's not like high school anymore. My deal with my kids was they were their grades and they were going to tell me how they did or they weren't. I appreciated when they did and and we had lots of honest discussions about grades. It's a whole different ball game from high school. We all had top-notch high school students, but college is a bit different. My straight A student came home one night and called us up and said, "Dad, I got a 32 on my first exam." So, being open and non-judgmental about their progress helps them continue to tell you about their progress, I think.
Well, and I would agree with what Lou has said and add that whatever whatever your student's experience was in high school, their experience in college is going to be different. It might not be 32 on the first test. It might be difficulty with adjusting to how they study for the the rigor of a college class, or it could be finding a quiet environment to study. They might learn that being in a crowded dorm with lots of activity, that isn't conducive to them getting their work done. So it will really kind of be a as non-judgmental as possible. I know that's very, very difficult sometimes for us as parents, particularly if the students have done very well previously in their high school career. Um, it can be stressful and upsetting to hear something not go away that you have expected it to. But the students, they'll work it out. It really is a growth opportunity for them to figure out how they need to do things differently in college, and just trust them and trust their process of adjusting to life in college.
Perfect. All right, Shay, I'm going to stick with you for a second and then open this up to any other panelists who may have thoughts, but saw a question early on about move-in weekend. So best advice for that process. Got some concerns around it being crowded, how smoothly that process will go. What would you all say about that process?
Well, I would really jump to reassure all of you parents that, as intimidating as it seems and as it sounds, and you're getting emails, print the document, and be sure you have it with you. Print the document, have it with you. You're going to need it. But it really does go so smoothly. The move in, the housing staff, transportation really do have it down to a science. You pull up, you do your check-in, you get your student's key, you get right to your dorm. You have 30 minutes to get your stuff out of ours. And
I think we may have lost Shay for just a moment. Happy to pick up where she left off. So she was talking about the beginning of the process. Basically, you're told through Clemson Home, or by Clemson Home rather, exactly where to go to pick up your key, and then exactly where to pull up to unload your belongings, which is certainly part one of that process. Where I think she was headed is just a reminder that Clemson Home really has this down to a science. I know it will seem like you've got a narrow window of time, or it will seem like a lot of people are there at once. And they are, but they are also in very specific assignments that really make the timing assignments work best. Always, anything you would add to move-in weekend advice that you would share for making that day go as smoothly as possible?
I can share one really quick. The biggest thing that I did when I was moving in was actually have that discussion about what communication would look like on the day of move-in. Me and my family said that this was my experience, and so we were going to kind of like let me run the show a little bit, but that's different for every family. So it was we had different tasks that we knew going in. My dad was going to help build furniture. My mom was going to help me put clothes. My sister was going to help me decorate the walls. We kind of had that plan going into it so that there was no frustration with the emotion of moving in, because it is a really stressful time. But I always think outlining expectations and upholding yourselves to those is what allows for the most smooth transition into this new opportunity.
Oh, I would like to add something as well.
Yeah.
As Lanier said, yes, definitely going with a game plan. I also saw the question had some concern about the roommate moving in at a closer time to them as well. Obviously, you can't change your move-in time. I would have them still bring their stuff in, but if maybe there could be some communication where each student could have some time to start moving in their stuff, because I know that moving in at the same time can be very frustrating and a lot at one point. So if there's any way that you guys can maybe give them a couple hours to move in first and then you guys go ahead and do it after, I think that would make moving a lot smoother as well.
Great tips, y'all. All right, I'm seeing another question. It looks like Lou may have some thoughts on how to learn about a work-study opportunity.
So both of my older children participated in work studies, co-ops, and internships while they were at Clemson. Um, Talking with their advisor gets some stuff. There's all most majors have co-ops or internships available throughout the program. Um, Things to do on campus. Uh, your advisors often have stuff about that. The Career Center is a great place to get to know people, to help find those jobs on campus. There is a program. There's a specific program called the UPIC program, that has on-campus jobs throughout the year, and internships over the summer as well. So look for that as a resource, but also make sure to look for some of those major specific opportunities by talking with your advisors.
Awesome.
I would also mention about work studies is that through Clemson Job Link, like you said, we have a bunch of jobs available for like on campus that don't interfere too much with your learning experience. I personally, I'm an RCM. I find that that's really good, and that there's also the at the desk workstations that you can do that all provide housing on top of being paid, and I'd recommend those.
Perfect, y'all. I saw a question earlier, and it may be that it got answered, but could be beneficial to share with the group. A question referencing the Academic Success Center that Shay talked about in her introduction. Saw a couple questions about how students find out about those opportunities and ways that students can kind of learn early on in that first week of classes, how to best take advantage of those. OAs, would y'all be willing to speak to that?
I can say a couple of things. For workshops, yes, those are mostly presented in the first couple weeks. They can go into their CU Navigate and book for those there. They should also be getting some emails with more information about that as well. But in terms of tutoring and PAL sessions, their professors will introduce their PAL leader in the first couple of days of class and let them know their PAL schedule, whether it's Tuesdays, Thursdays, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. They won't get all of that information. And I saw also asking if tutoring is free. Yes, tutoring is completely free. That's another thing in your CU Navigate where you can go and book sessions for any time, any course.
Perfect. Doing another scroll here. So this question I think might have a few questions in it that I think both our students and parents may have some perspective on. So thinking through just the academic transition, I think in general, from high school to college, from another institution to Clemson, some courses where there are very few assignments and those weigh more in terms of grades, some classes where maybe you don't quite have the same handle on it until further into the semester. Curious from our orientation ambassadors what your experience of that transition has been, if you would say that that is similar to your experience, if there are ways you have figured out how to stay more on top of that transition, and anything that you do personally to kind of make sure that you are organized, that you kind of know where you stand in terms of grades, and that you are where you expect to be by the end of each semester.
Yeah, I can jump right into this one. I am going to my senior year, so I've had quite a few semesters under my belt. The biggest thing I suggest is your student will get their syllabus before the first day of class. If they don't, it'll be on that first day. They can look at that syllabus and see when every single assignment for the whole semester is due. And they often include like a calendar of like when the last day to add or drop a class is. And so they can see exactly how many grades or assignments they'll have before then. If they feel like maybe they won't have the strongest grasp on the material before the add drop date, because it is only about 2 weeks after the first day of class, they can always stop by the ASC and say, like, this is a concern that I have, and they can meet one coach. Because I know me, I didn't really know how to take notes. So I did not the best on some of my first assignments, but they helped me out with that. And so always kind of checking in with that syllabus and always referring back to it is the biggest thing that I always suggest. And then as they get more comfortable with their course load, find students that are maybe a year or a semester ahead of you who've taken the same classes and see what strategies have worked for them. So for me in my major, I always look for the students who are about to graduate because I know that they've just taken the courses that I'm signing up for and they can give me different tips and tricks. So I always say encourage your student to be a little bit outgoing in that aspect.
Great advice, Lanier. Next up, I'm seeing a question about on-campus transportation. So, as I imagine folks are aware at this point, first-year students will not be able to have their vehicles here on campus unless approved by a waiver. We do have some things in place to help make sure that they are still just as able to get where they need to go. And so, Jordan, if you could talk about what on-campus and off-campus transportation looks like, I think that would be great.
Yeah, so there's a couple different options. So for on-campus shuttles, we have a lot of shuttles that will go to and from, say, like commuter parking lots, but they also do make stops on campus. So a student could hop on a bus at any point along the route if that would get them, closer to their classes and whatnot. I ride that all the time, being a commuting student myself. I ride the bus from my parking lot into campus just about every single day. We also have the Clemson area transit buses, so CAT buses. They have different routes that will drop your student off. It'll take them to the Walmart, the Ingles, some grocery stores, things of that nature. And they can see those bus routes on the CAT bus website. And then also something that I think is worth mentioning as well, we do have a lot of events that happen on campus in the evening time. So we have what's called the Clemson Night Line, and it's kind of like Uber in a way, except it's a bus and not a car. But you can your student can like order the night line starting at 6 p.m. and it goes until at some point in the early hours of the morning. I can't remember exactly at this moment. But basically they can order it and I've used it a bunch this summer just to go, say if they're studying at the library and it's like 10 o'clock at night and they don't want to walk back to their residence hall in the middle of the night, they can order the night line. It will pick them up close to the library and drop them off right in front of their residence hall or really close by. So that is a great resource as well for our students here on campus.
Perfect. Jumping over to our family ambassadors for just a moment. Saw this question earlier and saw a response, but wondering if it could be helpful to hear from all of you. A question that just asked, what was the biggest surprise for you as a parent that was not on your radar? So just generally coming into the Clemson community, what was something as you reflect back on that first year, on your students' first year, what was something that that surprised you that you would offer to our new families?
I put a little bit of a response in the Q&A. Um, for me, it was really a shock to my system looking at how registration for classes and just really monitoring how you move towards progress for your degree. It was overwhelming for me looking as a parent. My son came in and his intention was initially to be a marketing manager. I mean, yeah, a marketing major. And so he had to go through the whole list of the pre-business courses before he could move into that major. Um, and trying to determine which exact class that was. And really, it just really felt like drinking through a fire hose. Um, my son did not pay a whole lot of attention in the CU 1000 course. And I think also in the part of the orientation modules addresses degree works. That was a just a wonderful resource that spells everything out for your student for what their major is, even if it's undeclared at that time. It shows you with your general ed courses what you need to take, how far you have moved towards your progression of your degree, and it can even give you some what if scenarios. What if your child wanted to change their major? What if your child wanted to add a minor? And you can run all of those scenarios and have it tell you exactly course by course with the course number of what you need to do. And I thought that was really a wonderful time and anxiety saver.
It's a great one. All right. We have got time for a couple more questions here, friends. Let me do a quick scroll through our list. One thing that I think we've touched on a little bit or danced around is just generally the resources that are available to students in that first week, that first few weeks. There's a lot going on campus, and we know that that can be a little overwhelming, but also a wealth of opportunities. Orientation ambassadors, if you could share something that you'd recommend for students to take advantage of in that first semester, or something that you did, whether that was a club that you joined, another way that you got involved, that kind of helped ease that connection in that first little bit of your time at Clemson, what would you say?
I'd first recommend going to Tiger Prow to go look for clubs. I think it's a really awesome event that we hold in Death Valley, the massive stadium for football. It has most of our major clubs and organizations there. It gives you a lot of places, a lot of people that you can talk to, and kind of figure out what you want to get into on campus. It's a really good way to get involved.
One thing I would definitely recommend to all incoming students is Welcome Week, all the events. Just stay up to date. I know I came in not knowing anybody at Clemson at all, so I was really nervous about the social aspect, and I really wanted to put myself out there. And the first thing that I did was go to those Welcome Weeks events, and I met some of my closest friends. So yes, I would definitely recommend your students going to the Welcome Week events.
Yeah, I'll say something very similar. I think the weeks of welcome programming that we have is absolutely phenomenal for any asset that your student might want to engage with. But I also always encourage them, like, if they don't know for fall break or spring break, but they are, which is our outdoor rec center, they have different trips, or our center for
I think you're back, Linear. We heard going on trips during breaks.
Oh, Yes, so the outdoor recreation center, they'll do some that will pair you up with other students who are interested in like the same sort of experience, whether it's camping, whitewater rafting, but also the Center for Student Leadership and Engagement, which again is going through that kind of name change. So your student can still look out for that. They do alternative spring and fall breaks. So if your student's interested in community service, and that's something that they did a lot with in high school, that's a great way to not meet other students who are interested in that, but to find ways to get involved in this Clemson community. Because I know I wasn't super familiar with like what it meant to be a Clemson Tiger until maybe participating.
Yeah, I love that plug, Lanier. We really do pride ourselves on the opportunities that we provide for students, both, of course, in and outside the classroom. I think there is a lot of development and learning and growing and becoming a good citizen that happens in some other experiences on campus. And volunteering and service is certainly one of them. I'm a little biased as the department who helps to create a lot of those opportunities, but I would certainly encourage your students to consider that. Somewhat along those lines, in terms of service and finding ways to volunteer, Jordan, anything you would share about your experience as a volunteer here at Clemson?
Yes, I was very fortunate to be able to volunteer with the Clemson Life program. If you're not familiar with that, that is the program that Clemson has for students with intellectual or developmental disabilities. They get to come live on campus, they take college classes, they learn life skills, how to budget, grocery shopping, cooking, all of those things. I was able to serve as a lunch peer, and so every Tuesday, first semester, I had lunch with some of the freshman students in the program. And that was a great way just to get to know them better. We had a lot of fun, a lot of great conversations around the lunch table. Um, and I would say that that has been a really fulfilling experience for me. They also put on a talent show every year. So if you're local or if you're around during that time, or I would highly encourage your students to go as well. Um, it's basically like a fundraiser for their program. So you buy a $10 ticket and that goes straight to the life program just to help support what they do. But they have those students do all kind of different acts. They had karate, they had dancing, they had singing, all kinds of things. It was a really amazing, high energy, fun experience. And so if that's something that your student is interested, I definitely recommend that they get involved with the Clemson Life program. They will not be disappointed.
Awesome. I'm going to jump back just a moment, make sure that we speak to this one part of things. Lanier, you reminded me as you were talking about ways to spend time during those breaks. We know that there are a lot of opportunities to take advantage of that time on campus, and also that some folks will want to go home during some of those breaks. Just to reiterate this particular detail of our parking and transportation spiel, if you will, Jordan, could you talk specifically about those airport shuttles as well?
Yes. Okay. So we have airport shuttles. They run during like the major holiday breaks. Signups for those open 2 months before the breaks. So I would encourage your student to sign up for that early. Those shuttles will take them to the Greenville-Spartanburg Airport or the Charlotte Airport. Those are free to students, but spots do fill up fast. And if by the time they register, all the spots are filled up, encourage them to join the wait list. But basically, the shuttle will take them and their luggage to the airport at different times right around the break. So that is a great resource for anybody who needs that, especially since there is no extra cost with that.
Perfect. And then jumping back to a topic that we had started on earlier tonight. I know we touched on the work study piece a little bit, but generally thinking about on-campus employment. So if my student is interested in having a job while they're a student, particularly on campus, Grady and whoever else may have experiences to share, tell us how a student might go about that.
So I'm going to mention a couple here. I'd use the Clemson job link. That's through your Clemson portal. Once you go through there, there'll be I think there's a couple jobs available. That'll pop up, and you'll have applications, everything, application due dates, such as tour guides, work on campus, such as like the two area desks. So the East and West area desk hires people. You can be hired at the different restaurants around campus. You can be hired as at the different buildings. I think Holtzendorf, the Watt Center, every single one of those has their own staff that they hire for students. I'm an RCM, a residential community mentor, which means I work inside the different housing apartments on campus, and that's a really good job in my opinion. Also, you can be an OA. You'll find all that, like I said, through the job link.
We've touched on this a little bit too, but certainly also your student's academic college is another place to think about when it comes to looking for those opportunities. I know that many of the college coordinators and associate deans are always looking for students to work in some of those roles and often send those out in a listserv to students who are in each of those colleges. So another opportunity to stay on top of that email for sure. But certainly another place to look for an on-campus job option.
To add to that really quickly, if your student is wanting to apply for an on-campus job, I highly recommend that they check out the Career Center for Professional Development. They offer a lot of help with resumes. I didn't know what a professional resume looked like. I didn't have one. They have a template, so I filled it out to the best of my ability and then went in person and sat down with somebody and they looked over my resume and helped me fine tune it and really refine it. So I would definitely suggest that they look into that because that can really help them and give a leg up in their applications, and that is also completely free to your student. There's no additional cost to that as well.
Jordan, along those lines, I think we spend a lot of time talking in families. I imagine a lot of time thinking through what aspects of a student's Clemson experience can really make them career ready, right? So we want them to come and succeed in the classroom. We want them to make friends and form relationships and really come into who they are. And we know that the ultimate goal, of course, is graduating and moving along to whatever awaits them in their post-Clemson lives. So curious both from our orientation ambassadors and from our CFAB members, as the adulty adults on the call, what would you all say in terms of what a student could do to really have that in mind? So what opportunities can they pursue? What skills can they develop? What do you think is most important as they are thinking about being career ready and being ready for what comes after Clemson?
I think I can start. Hopefully, I'll stay connected. But the biggest thing that I was told from my orientation ambassador when I was coming in is pick an organization that you know that you'll be extremely comfortable in, one that you already know about maybe, and one that will push you outside your limits a little bit. So for me, that was becoming an OA myself. I wasn't used to public speaking and working with small groups of people. So always like finding ways, those soft skills are what employers really care a lot about. So they can do really well in the classroom, but you want to make sure they also feel supported in those daily interactions that they're going to have with their coworkers. So I always say, look for an opportunity that you feel really comfortable in and one that might push you outside of your limits a little bit.
One thing I can also say to push them to look for internships or just be able to build relationships with people is getting close to their professors. Not even getting close to, but going to those office hours and trying to build some type of relationship with them is also very important, especially if they're looking to go to professional school after this and need recommendation letters or just research or internships in general. Those are great resources for sure.
Well, I would add that all students have a different pace for really getting acclimated and getting engaged on campus. So, as far as parents, don't get stressed out if your student isn't joining multiple clubs or attending multiple different functions right off the bat. My son, when he started, he got right into a club sport and stayed active with them his whole Clemson career. My daughter mainly spent her fall semester of her freshman year uh, getting acclimated to Clemson and hanging out with the people that lived on her hall in her dorm. And, she kind of added an involvement each semester after that. So this circles back to what we started with. Give your student time and space to figure out what works for them. And they'll really identify some very surprising opportunities that will help them grow and mature and move them towards being the self-possessed adult in charge of their own direction that we are all working for and hoping that they will be.
Great word, Shay. All right, friends, we've got time for one more question before we transition to some final reminders. And we've had this kind of throughout our discussion tonight, but you've heard me talk about the parent portal. You've heard us talk about some other tools that we'd recommend you and your student look into. There are a lot. I wish I could say that will stop. Unfortunately, there just are a lot that are helpful in your students and your family's success. Panelists, curious what you would put on that list. So what are kind of your in the back pocket apps, websites, tools, Clemson resources that you feel like really help you do Clemson and do college well? And what would you recommend to our families?
As a student who has commuted ever since my freshman year, just because of my hometown is very close to Clemson, and I had my housing requirement waived my freshman year. The Clemson Parking and Transportation Services website has become one of my most frequented. I keep the bus schedule in my tabs on my browser on my iPhone, so that way I can always look up the bus schedule. And also the Passio Go app has been really awesome because you can actually track the buses in real time. I have actually really enjoyed those things just as a commuting student because that's part of my daily life. I drive to school every day, park every day, and ride the bus every day. So those are essential to me.
Others that y'all find helpful?
I would say definitely having CU Navigate app on my phone was really helpful. I really utilized the tutoring at the Academic Success Center a lot. So just being able to book appointments from my phone whenever it was right in the front of my brain was always really helpful for me. And also having Canvas and Outlook on my phone because sometimes assignments would slip by my head and they would notify me through my phone. And I spend most of my time on my phone and not my computer and checking emails and stuff. So that was really important for me to have.
I would recommend getting the Get mobile app. That's where you're gonna have your Tiger ID or your CU ID. It allows you to get into buildings, pay for things with Paul points, and pretty much anything else you need to do on campus you can do through Get mobile.
I'll throw one out there, not really an app, but my kids learned to use Outlook very quickly. The university does a lot of communication via email, especially about football lottery tickets and such. Um, my oldest missed a lottery email and never missed one again because he got real friendly with the Outlook app.
Could not echo that more, Lou. Any students who spend any time in my office know that I am pro Outlook, pro let's figure out how to manage our email, let's figure out how to use those tools. They're just going to follow you post Clemson, and so would certainly echo those words of advice for sure. All right, friends. Well, we are coming to the end of our time here. Certainly appreciate the questions that you've submitted. And panelists, if y'all don't mind doing one more scan of those as I move us along into our last couple slides here. I said it in the beginning, but just did want to offer one more plug for the Clemson Parent and Family Experience Portal. We send out Clemson news, things that we all receive as staff and students. We want to make sure make it to you. We mirror messages like that. We send out messages that our family ambassadors have put together. Anything that is going to help you be better equipped to support your student is most likely going to make its way onto the portal. So would certainly encourage you to configure your account there. Again, that is where we will send this recording once we've got it up and ready. And then again, we are, as I mentioned, rounding out our Tiger Talk series. So we have one more next Wednesday, August 5th. That's our final session called Next Steps for Success. We talked a little bit about, a little bit tonight about all the things that we'll talk about in that session. So our weeks of welcome programming, what you can expect in those 6 weeks. Our Center for Career and Professional Development, our Executive Director, Dr. Neil Burton, will be present to share more about some upcoming early ways to engage there. And then Dr. Sue Horton, our Executive Director of the Academic Success Center, will be present. She will go through those Jumpstart workshops that we talked about and some other ways to get connected to the ASC early. So hope to see you there. Hope that you're able to go back and watch some recordings of the previous sessions, and certainly appreciate you joining us here tonight. I believe that covers it. Sherelle has shared all the links in the chat, so definitely grab those before we close the session. But again, keep an eye on your email for a message from the portal that will have this recording here in the next couple of days. Wishing you all the best as we get closer and closer to move-in. Thanks again for being here, and go Tigers. Good night.